What's up, everybody, and welcome to C and Najad Sports. It's been a minute. The last episode was Thorb. That was an amazing episode, but I think we're upping our game even a little bit more. Kyland Young, you might know him from Big Brother, you might know him from The Challenge, or you just might know him from being around. Kyland, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you giving me your time, because I know just from looking at your Instagram, like TikTok, Twitter, you're a busy man. You're doing a lot of the challenge touring, meeting up with a lot of people. So I genuinely appreciate you being with me today.
No, see, thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel I am running around a lot, doing a lot of things, but I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. And so, yeah, any opportunity I have to connect with people, I really appreciate you reaching out. And yeah, I'm excited to chat.
Awesome, man. So here's the thing. I know I've looked at your Instagram in particular. Like, I know you go on a lot of different, or sometimes you're on a lot of different shows, some that have to do with like just bettering oneself, which is really what this show is about. And then there are some shows that are like, hey, I want to ask you about The Challenge. Like, why did Olivia make that decision? Like, talk to me about Burna. Like, I get all that. So if you don't mind, like, I'm going to thread some of the challenge stuff in here. Like this whole Najad Sports show, for those of you that might be watching now or later and you don't really know what this show is about, the sports part's a bit of a misnomer. Like this show is really, and this is probably my 18th episode now, it's really about motivating people, just creating healthy habits, inspiring people to like not only have the goal idea in their head, but actually move toward the goal in like an appreciable way. And Kylan, like just from knowing you, you're kind of like the perfect guest as far as I'm concerned. So I will pepper in some challenge questions. I'm more of a challenge guy than Big Brother, just for what it's worth. But let me ask you this just right off the bat, because obviously people know you from The Challenge. A lot of people know you from The Challenge. They know you from Big Brother. But you were just like kind of like everybody else prior to that, right? And I hate to characterize it like that, but you were like,
I get you though,
normal, like in the corporate world, doing a corporate job. And my impression from what I've studied is that you were fine doing that, correct?
Yeah, no, that's exactly correct. I was in the corporate world. I did marketing. I worked at a marketing agency for like 5 years, and then I was at a media company, and then I was at this tech company. But the whole time, pretty much doing marketing, business development, business partnerships at very cool companies that I was having an absolute blast working with fun people. I really loved it. I was very fortunate. Like when I would talk to so many of my friends in the corporate world that just were not in jobs or positions that they were really enjoying as much as I was enjoying mine. And I had really amazing bosses and coworkers, and was just, yeah, having a really good time, and still had some flexibility to even like work on side businesses and stuff at different times and volunteer and do other things I was passionate about. But I just loved the game of Big Brother. So like I was watching it.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up. I had zero, like my conversation with my boss beforehand was like, hey, I'm just going to go, well, even if I win, like I'm just going to like buy a house or something, and then I'll go back to work. And after I came out, I definitely give credit to my boss, Chris Gray. He's about my age, massively successful company. He came up through Shark Tank originally, and has a company called Scully. It helps kids get scholarships. It's a tech company. It helps kids find scholarships. And he was like, afterwards, like I was like, I don't know. I think I kind of want to see what I could do with this moment. He's like, you should. He's like, you definitely should just see what else. Like yeah. And because you can go back to like you have enough skills and experience that you can come back to like the corporate world later on if you want to. But right now, if you have an opportunity to try new things, why not? And so then I took a very, very intentional approach, and it's paying off, and I'm really thankful for it. So I was stoked beforehand, and now I'm just stoked now.
So that's really cool. Just to give you just a little background on my story too, because it's kind of similar, and my boss was involved too. So I was an attorney, a trial lawyer for 13 years in Richmond, Virginia, and in Fort Lauderdale. Then I got into the pharma world because I was a little disenchanted with practicing law. And my boss, who brought me over to the pharma world, my boss, his name is Jonathan Brisson. He convinced me to play in the World Series of Poker main event, which I played in 2018. I cashed.
Oh my gosh.
This isn't an advertisement for me, but there's a reason I'm telling you this, because
this is amazing. Please.
Thank you. So if it was that moment in terms of going to pharma and having my boss convince me to go to the World Series of Poker, I never, and it's a longer story than I'm telling, but I never would have made the connections to get into media. So now I'm in full-time media because he convinced me, and it was the same argument. It's like, dude, just go play. I know it's expensive. You're making decent money right now. Just it's a this thing. Just go play and come back, see what happens. And it was because of that I made the connections in the media world, the sports media world specifically. And now I'm doing, now I'm on TV in Washington, D.C. Now I'm doing stuff for CBS Sports and Sportsline. And again, it's those like stepping outside the box principles that are like literally the foundation of what this Cena John sports show is all about. So my follow-up question for you is, obviously you're glad you did it. Have we turned the page on the corporate world? Are you like, I don't even understand how the reality TV thing works. Like, when I see that people on the challenge, people from like 20 years ago, like they're still in it. They're either on the challenge or they're doing sort of challenge content. And I absolutely love all of it. Is that sort of your plan to some regard as well?
Well, first off, wait, how did you do in the poker tournament?
Okay. So it's such a weird number. I finished 1,009th out of 7,874. So I was in the top, I guess, 11%, which meant I cashed.
Yeah.
I got to do I got pocket fives cracked by ace king.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Did you just do the math? Did you just correct my 11%? Was it actually top 14%?
I was like 14,
I know you're good at math. You might have been flexing there. But no,
I was stopping myself. I was like, oh no, that's where. But no matter what, that's impressive. That's pretty awesome.
Appreciate that. So what's the deal with you? So are you like, let me ask you this. Are we looking forward? Can we look forward? Because everybody that's watched you, Kyland, I genuinely believe, and I know how you're going to take this because you're so humble. Like, I don't know you, but I know you kind of thing. Like, everybody's a fan, right? I mean, and you know that. You're not going to admit it, but you know that. And I think everybody who watches specifically The Challenge, because that's the show I'm a huge fan of. Not that I don't like Big Brother. I just never got into it as much as The Challenge. I want to see. Yeah, fair enough. I want to see on the next 10 to 15 seasons of The Challenge. Is that something? I know that's not your call necessarily, but is that something maybe we can be looking forward to?
Yeah, I would definitely say that I share that same hope. I mean, I absolutely love it. And, when you see these guys, the Mark Longs and Cyrus and, Bananas and CT, they're doing, I'm 32 right now. And, I think Bananas and CT are like 42, 44-ish. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, all right, like, if that's an option to do it for these next 10 years, I would love to. I just absolutely enjoy it. And yeah, I love everything about competing in it. It's such a unique, awesome experience. And then as far as like return to corporate world, like, I don't think directly. I would say myself and Derek Chow from my Big Brother season, we did Challenge USA together. And then him and his girlfriend, Claire, who they met on Big Brother, they went on to win The Amazing Race for 2022. And he's like one of my best friends. And so him and I have been working on a business called Creator Pass that's like in launch phase right now. Like earlier, we're connecting with businesses. So it's small businesses and influencers. And I think that's something that I want to continue growing or whatever. But I feel like that, I think that's as close as I would get, as like, building something rather than returning to jobs. From what I can see right now, I feel like my experiences of the last 10 years has just, showed me that I couldn't write this out. I couldn't have planned this. And I feel the same about the next 10 years. So I'm like, what I want, I have big long-term goals about like how I want to feel, what I want to feel like I'm accomplishing, but I'm very open to whatever happens. But as far as like hopes, from what I feel and what I know right now, it would be awesome to be able to play the challenge for the next decade. And few other shows really stood out to me. I mean, I think I'm, of course, anything else Big Brother. I love that game. I would go back as well. I'd say Priority is a challenge. So like if I ever had to choose, that would probably win in most scenarios. But you see Johnny and CT on Intershell on Traders. Yeah. And I'm like, that one looks fun. Like if I could dip over there for a day, I feel like there's so many other people they would pick before me from Big Brother space, but or challenge space or whatever. But as far as like, I think that, and then the content, being able to create social media content. I'm on TikTok lives like every day and connecting with people, and almost every day. And I love it. That's new for me. Only since November, the end of November. But I've just had a lot of fun. It's like, people, and sometimes like you get like backlash, people, misinterpreting what it's like, but the positive feedback, which is all social media, the positive feedback that I've had from people who are like, you know what, I really appreciate that you take this time, you're connecting with us and so frequently. And like, the stories I hear about people with their kids that, they're on the spectrum or neurodivergent some other way, or maybe just a minority and just finding some sort of inspiration in me, is pretty special. And so I just love connecting with people, and the fact that social media gives you opportunities to connect with people and, find opportunities, whether it's with TikTok directly or whether it's with, brand deals and stuff on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. I feel, like I said, very fortunate, and definitely, there's intentionality to it. After Big Brother, after I talked to my boss and decided I wanted to take this route, like I knew, I never have any control over, like, any say over whether or not they called me to another show, but I saw that there was like 2 to 4 at most from most seasons of Big Brother, that didn't go back to, like, their old sort of day jobs, that pursued some sort of thing on their own, and like content, or entertainment, mostly content specifically. And I was like, okay, well, let me talk to all those people. So that's what I did. I went back to the past couple of seasons, and it's such an alumni network. So many of them are so positive and gave me, like, because it's a lot of work too. Like I said, I came from corporate working a lot, and it's a lot of work here, but being able to, like, share my story and connect with people and still have the flexibility to compete on these shows, has made this the path that I'm really enjoying.
I love it. I absolutely love that. By the way, there's some people in the chat that are big fans of yours. Chris says hi, but Dan Clark says, Kyland, I loved you on the challenge. He says Olivia is dirty. Of course, he's referring to the gameplay. That one moment, that singular moment that I can tell you, Kyland, I'm married. My wife and I are big fans of the show. There was, and you saw my original tweet on this, now that I think about it, but my jaw actually dropped when she
What
said,
was
I guess
it?
When the tweet, or when the surprise moment?
Both.
So when Olivia chose, I guess she chose Mariah instead of Nerys.
Mhm.
That moment for me, and I want to let's just talk about that real quick, because I'm going to pepper in some of this challenge stuff. I want to
Yeah.
get back to something really important that you just referenced, but literally my jaw dropped. Like, when people say their jaw dropped, but they're like saying it figuratively, like my jaw actually dropped. And I looked over at my wife and I'm like, what? So I guess my question for you is, listen, I know you've kind of been over this, and I know you were surprised, and you probably have some stuff to say. And I know when they edited some stuff where, she wanted to take Nerys's position, but also kind of knew that she couldn't. What was going through your head? Did you know she was going to say Mariah's name, or were you as shocked as everybody else?
No. So I was shocked, not about the 3 of us going in. I was shocked about the possibility of us not. And I think that's what made it hurt so much more, is that, like, we had known, like, the 3 of us knew that we were going to be in. Like, there was every scenario that we talked about, that we considered, it was going to be the 3 of us. That's why I also was, as I've said, continuously annoyed with, like, Jay or anyone else who was like, no, like, those was supposed to happen. It's like, I mean, then you guys were not doing anything proactive to make it not happen. So that's just not true. There's some cognitive dissonance there. And so my surprise, we just assumed that it would end on Olivia and she would be the last one saved, as opposed to being the 3rd person saved. And then we're like, so that is, even in the scene, like, my head like cocks. I was like, what? Like, no way. Like, oh my gosh, is this about, it changed a hopeless situation into a hopeful situation, only to have the hope, like, ripped away in a way that was also painful personally. So that was and I haven't even explained it like that before. Yeah, that was definitely, it was great. I mean, it was surprising in that sense.
That's interesting. So you went in thinking it was going to be you 3, and then out of nowhere, Olivia's name gets called out early, and you're thinking, oh, well, I still might be going in, but at least all 3 of us aren't going in all likelihood. And then Olivia picked.
Because the night before, she had told me that there was a possibility. She's like, I can save Nerys and Horacio and just not you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. And I was fighting with Horacio, like, because he's like, well, I'd pick you. I was like, no, if they make a deal, like, you can't pick me. Like, you have to honor that deal for them. And he's like, no. And I was like, all right, well, we'll see. but that's unlikely. So when I saw her, I was like, oh my gosh, like I said, and that would have been fine. Like if they could have just saved those two even, and not me, because it's just like, yeah, it was, yeah. So it was definitely
I'll
that
tell you
roller
what,
coaster, that emotional roller coaster.
Kylan, I'll tell you what, when you all went to the conquest or whatever it's called, the elimination, and because that was only the second conquest, if memory serves, and I wasn't 100% sure, like that it was going to be 2 out of the 3 that were going home. So I was like
Yes.
so unpleasantly surprised because I honestly, like, it felt like TJ was kind of rooting for you all, like a good versus evil type situation. So I was hoping like somehow, some way it would just be one of you going home instead of the both of you. Were you surprised as well that it was 2 of you?
Yeah, I mean, very I don't know if surprise is like, it was more just, I don't know, sad, more
Yeah.
sad than surprise. Like it was like, dang, like we already woke up like not feeling it that day. And me and Rasto just were like, all right, like, now that was the only thing we didn't want, was to be down there with either of the girls. Well, at the time, either of the girls, because we thought both of them were close to us. And yeah, and then so it was definitely a situation that felt like, I don't know, yeah, it felt rough. So then when so even when we were there and getting that, and TJ almost felt like he knew, because of the last elimination when it was me and Horacio and Zara, he was like, I do not want to see you guys back here. Don't come back here. Like, make sure. He's like, you guys better start winning or whatever. And so we were just like, that's the plan. And then it sounds like, that it was rough because we also felt like we did win that last challenge, but
Yeah.
technicalities. So then, yeah, it was just to be there and to hear that. And it's funny because you could also see, if you watch like they do the interviews before the elimination, and it's like Racio's like, I don't know, like, this sucks. We're gonna see what happens. Like heads down, shoulders are slumped. I'm the same way. I'm just like, yeah, we gotta try and get the job done, whatever. And they do the interview with Nerys, and she's just standing there like Wonder Woman, just like standing up, like, it
Yeah.
sucks, but like I'm gonna get it done. And we were just like, so when I watched it back, I was like, well, yeah, that makes, like, she just was clocked in and ready, and she's so crazy smart and just good at a lot of things. And it was, I don't know, it was also kind of special though, because people ask me like, what are my favorite moments from the season? And I feel like that's almost probably my like the elimination against Brad was dope because that was like my birthday that night, and that was really cool. But then in the second champion, but then the moment with I was like, my second favorite moment might be when Nerys beat us, because it was like, I'm a fan of the show. So I'm like, that upset is probably epic to watch, like upset at the time from the perception of what we were seeing. And so, and it was funny because we spent like the whole day before telling Nerys, like, Nerys, you could beat us. Like Nerys, like we just called into existence. And then she, and it just felt like it was a special because we care about her. Like I care about Nerys so much that it's like, this was probably more impactful than it would have been for like Horacio to win the final. Like mentally for him, how much would he have gained? Or even me, I feel like, how much would we have gained from winning the final? It would have been awesome and amazing. But like, to find Nerys like believing in herself, of being capable of all the things we already knew she was capable of, that's like, invaluable. And so yeah, it was a lot of different emotions, but bittersweet for sure.
Yeah, I completely see what you're saying there. I mean, the reality is, as a viewer, it was so deflating, and it didn't matter that she won. It was deflating that we knew 2 of you were going home. It could have been you and Nerys. It could have been Horacio and Nerys. Like either way, it was just going to be like, man, this whole little block got kind of taken out, and that was like just. I mean, listen, everybody was rooting for you all for the most part on the show. So I'm actually going to get back to that a little bit later. There's something you brought up earlier about. You mentioned being on the spectrum, ADHD diagnosis, autism. Let me ask you this, because my understanding is that was something you learned about yourself sort of later in life. Can you clarify that? Like, where were you in life when you got that diagnosis?
Yeah, so I got an ADHD diagnosis in college. My freshman year, I had 3 of my like 5 professors independently ask me about like, hey, have you ever gotten checked for ADHD? For a variety of reasons, telltale signs, I guess, that We just missed beforehand. And so then that was, so I was in college. And then 10 years later, after Big Brother, I had a variety of people, most notably my sister. My sister's like a sexual education expert. She works with a lot of families, and has seen, a lot of different people in different situations. And so she was like, hey, like, I've never observed you, because you don't really observe your, like, you don't observe your, you have no opportunity to observe a sibling like post adulthood or post childhood, I guess, in adulthood. But because of Big Brother, she did. And she was like, have you ever talked to a doctor about this? And gave me a recommendation. And so that's when that happened. And both scenarios were just very enlightening in the best positive way, like, to where I was like, oh, like, now I understand more about my brain and how I operate. And that that was just a wild experience for both of them, but very, like I said, enlightening, and has helped me understand myself and how I operate better, and things I continue to learn about and share. And I just decided to share the learnings, and because it's meant a lot to a lot of people, and
Yeah, I want to get to the meaning a lot to a lot of people, like, in a second, because when I watch that, when I watch you, like, because to me, you're representing so many different things. You're Mexican and Black, of course. You've got the autism, the ADHD. Like, I specifically think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the ADHD and specifically the autism being on the spectrum, I feel like that is still like quite the stigma. I mean, that's how I see it from like just like a worldview standpoint. But then people see you on the challenge or on Big Brother, and it's like, okay, wait a minute, like maybe I need to conceive of this like a little bit different than my previous thought. Like, what's your response to that?
I mean, response, as with most things, is usually some form of compassion, because it's like I feel the same. Like, I had such a lack of understanding of both things, of ADHD and autism, and much more familiar with ADHD because that's been something I've learned more and more about over a decade. But yeah, the last year and a half, 2 years, since my autism diagnosis, I think that one of the more interesting things is just how uncommon it is for people to be educated in it. Like, we're finding, that there is an underdiagnosis, especially in women and minorities. And so I think that, and then just the fact that it's a spectrum too. I think that's another issue that, like, I was just with Amber B, and we were talking about, like, and I have another friend, Demi. She's popular from like the Bachelor franchise, and we've just talked about how, like, people can misunderstand, like they have one perception, and then being an older diagnosed person means that you've had more experience masking things. So it's almost like you can be punished for getting really good at, like, hiding different aspects of how you're affected, in a way that, like, is in a way that's, like, can be frustrating, because it's like, oh man, like, it's like, well, oh, you may not seem autistic or whatever. It's like, what does that mean to you? Like,
Mhm.
people just speak from ignorance a lot, and that's why I say I'm compassionate about it, because I didn't have as much of an understanding myself. But it is, yeah, I mean, it's been uh, it's been an interesting experience overall, though, and and really just a practice and compassion and education, and getting to talk to people and share more of that. I think hopefully is helping more people have a wider view of what it means to be on the spectrum, and then also, and like I said, even none of the negative takes away from the positive of, like, talking to. I just did this Challenge Mania meet and greet event in Sacramento this weekend. And there's some people that brought, like, their children that were on spectrum, like, yo, like, they love watching you, and just pushes them to do more. And, like, that's the type of stuff that makes you emotional. And it's just like, oh man, like, all right, like, yeah, people really are watching, and it's impacting people. And I think that's been really, and it's like a perpetual loop of inspiring me to do more.
That's really, really cool. I mean, there's just no question, whether you're on the spectrum or not, that it's inspiring. But I would imagine with people particularly on the spectrum. By the way, let me ask you this. You might not have an answer to this question, but if people wanted to learn more about ADHD or autism, do you know of a place where they can go, whether it's like a charity that has the information that people can donate to, or whether it's a website or something that you're a part of, anything along those lines?
Yeah, so Brittany D'Angelo, who I did Big Brother with, she got diagnosed when she was like 2 years old. So we ended up having a lot, and she didn't share that diagnosis while in the house, not until after not until the finale. So we got to talk a lot, and her and her family's been super helpful in education and resources, and she works very closely with an organization called the Doug Flutie Foundation. And so I did an event with them last year at Boston Fenway Park, and I think that's just a really great organization because, and there's definitely people that I think being a newer, being the increased education and conversations that have been happening lately has created, funny enough, like almost some rifts or something, some different approaches, because some people, are suggesting like looking for a cure. And I believe, like the Doug Flutie Foundation and so many others believe that, like, it's not necessarily something that needs to be cured as much as something needs to be understood.
Mhm.
But people are affected to varying degrees. So I can totally understand. That's, once again, I feel compassion for that sentiment, because there are some people on the spectrum that require like a lot more support even into adulthood. And I can understand like wanting to, quote unquote, find a fix for that. But overall, I think, I don't know, just taking the approach instead of like, hey, like people are different, and and people on the spectrum can be different, but can also, thrive in so many different situations. So I mean, that's like the main organization that I've been connecting with. And I feel like ADHD, I don't know if I've ever connected with any organizations around that. I mean, the prevalence is really high. But I think for any individuals, just in general, like I definitely I just recommend education. There are so many people that are, there's a lot of TED Talks from professionals
Mhm.
who are on the spectrum, have ADHD, and literally have dedicated their lives like researching this. And like, you can look at those TED Talks, and then you can follow them on social media, or you can follow them, on Twitter or whatever, or on Twitter or Instagram, and find out more of their research. And I don't know, education is just such a powerful tool for understanding most things. So
I love that. And by the way, Dan Clark in here, he says, I got HD. He says, I got ADHD too. So I understand you, Colin. And he says, I couldn't have said it better myself. And Eric David is in here. He says his younger son has ADHD, that they are treating it. And he does say it poses some significant challenges. So I love that. Listen, we all need to be educated on all of this stuff, especially stuff that we just don't have a lot of information on. The last thing on this topic, one thing I heard you say, by the way, everybody should be following Kyland Young on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, because he addresses a lot of this stuff there. And I found something that I thought was so intriguing. I believe it was your doctor when she actually kind of found out that you did have, you were on the spectrum, if you will. And she sat down and she said, Kyland, congratulations. And it was, why did she say congratulations?
yeah, so I actually just shared that, yeah, for the first time. And I was with Kevin over on Maria Munoz's show, and she said congratulations, you're autistic. And I just remember in that pause though, like having like, a little bit of a panic moment where I was thinking about like, okay, like she's gonna say congratulations, you're not autistic. So that would so my mind was racing, trying to figure out, oh no, like, so now all these differences and stuff I've felt my whole life, like I just have no reason, no understanding for it. It just is what it is. And and I have no tools to like understand it better. But then when she said that, and I was like, oh, like I was caught guard, and she said that, I approach it that way very deliberately, to say congratulations, because I want you to look at like, this is a positive thing. Like, hey, like this isn't, an assignment of like a disability. It's just an assignment to help you, a diagnosis to help you understand more about yourself. And understanding more about yourself and how your brain operates is always going to be a good thing. And uh, that enables you to like find the right tools, and find, and to just have a better sense of how your mind operates. And that was probably one of the best things to happen, since, like, from that moment, like since this journey, because it set me off on the right foot, really. And yeah, something I'm appreciative for, and like
I
to
love
share.
that. That's amazing perspective provided by your doctor there. Let me ask you this. There's a really funny moment on the challenge. It was funny to me, and I think a lot of people that I do want to ask you about before I get there, because these two things tie in. You seem to be very calm, very measured with everything you do. I think that's a quality. I think I'm sort of like that as well. And I'm just curious where you get that from. Like the picture we have up here, if you're watching on YouTube, I believe that shirt says product of a strong female. I'm assuming that is an ode to your mom. But in terms of a support system, in terms of like creating the person that we see here today at only 32 years old, I think you're wise beyond your years. I really do. Who do we owe that to? Where's the support system coming from?
Well, yeah, I mean, for sure, for me, I'm very fortunate it started at home. My parents were divorced before I turned 1 year old, but both very much in my life, split custody. So I lived at both houses, just switched back and forth each week. And the amount of love has always been very consistent, unquestionable. And, I have four sisters. So I have a lot of siblings, and both my mom and my step parents, because both my parents got remarried, have always been just very loving and supportive. And pushing us to do more, like pushing us to do things like we go to the high desert where, I've mentioned many times, it was like in the early 90s, they call it the meth capital of the country. And it's just this desert wasteland where there's not much to do. And my mom pushed us to to stay in sports and to get jobs and to work from really young age. And same thing with my grandparents as well. And those things kept us like motivated. Like we were very self-sufficient and just pushing always to be more and to do more. And I think that support from home, that love, it's crazy to me as I've grown older to find so many people who just didn't have that. And so it makes me more and more grateful for it. And then just mentors along the way. I think that probably the most standout is a man named Tom Shadyac. He was at me and my sister were first generation, like to go to university. And I went to Pepperdine, and there was a professor that was teaching there, and his name's Tom Shadyac. He's like a filmmaker. So he wrote and directed like Nutty Professor and Liar Liar and Evan Almighty, Bruce Almighty, and Ace Ventura, like iconic stuff. And then he had a random, epiphany moment where he decided to switch his life to philanthropy and helping others. And it, that was somebody that I think has really just, quintupled the compassion that I feel for others, because he has such a giving, supportive heart. And that combination, I'm just very fortunate to have come across these people and connect with them as deeply as I have.
So the lead up to that, to this question was that question, because on the challenge, when you and Horacio came back, and by the way, great job selling the fact that Horacio wasn't coming back. I was like stunned at how good you were. It looked like when you kind of kneeled down, it looked like you were like kind of crying or pretending to cry. I was like, this guy, we're talking about like Oscar-worthy performance here. But what happened after that, Horacio came back and a bunch of people pretended like they were happy he came back. And we all know they weren't, obviously. But when Burna came up and she said, I think anybody who watched the show understands, like Burna, kind of drug people down a little bit. And that's putting it very, very lightly. But when she said she was happy and that she was sorry that you were gone and all that stuff, and you said, how sorry, it obviously like lit a flame with her. But like, that's what happens with her, right? So that's no surprise. The surprise to me was how you handled it. Because those types of things that we see on the challenge or reality television, you usually see, whether it's guy or girl, girl or girl, guy, like it usually escalates into a moment where it becomes a shouting match. People get close to each other. And I understand that's going to happen even with good people, but you disarmed it. Like you didn't disarm her because that's impossible, but you disarmed it and diffused it so well by literally laughing in her face. And I just thought that was such a clever way to handle a moment that really was not going to be manageable otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because even when I watch it, I'm like, I feel pretty good about it. I feel like, I'm like, maybe there's a little bit better way to some degree. Cause like, I also got to say, Pepperdine has the #1 conflict resolution program in the country. And so I also, got to take advantage of that. And I feel like de-escalating situations is something I'm really good at. But yeah, in that moment, it was just like, the culmination of the experience I was having in the game, and then also the experiences I was having with Burna, that so many people had. And it just was like, the soft kid glove approach is not working. And I think that I don't need to get into a shouting match. I don't need to, degrade this person, but I need to call them out on stuff that has been, very consistently happening. And I don't know. I feel like it's definitely something that I default to in general. Like I like I said, I feel pretty good about what I said there. I feel less good about my word choice with my situation, my big brother exit with Xavier. That word choice became disrespectful, and which not unintentionally so, but even there, if you watch, like I started laughing, like when, like a little bit, like chuckle, smiling when he was approaching me, and it wasn't like me goading him; it was just more like probably a de-escalating sort of thought in my head. So I definitely try and do that, and it's just like, I don't know. It's such an interesting. The show's, same thing with Jay. Like when Jay was, getting my face a little, or yelling at me from across the kitchen island. I try to not, escalate situations as much, which some of the fans actually are upset at me about. But I don't know. In general, I think, like you said too, I want to not. I recognize the dynamic on the man-woman dynamic, so I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna approach her. I'm just gonna stand here. But then she comes up into my face, and I still don't advance towards her because I'm like, all right, that could be bad. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like when people are, I definitely have tended to lean towards, can I say, can I remain a little bit of a cooler head? I think that it's rare that you do not do that. And I'm competitive too. And I feel like there's probably a competitive aspect of that as well, where I'm just like, I want to see if I can maintain more composure than you can, because if we're fighting, that means we're adversaries, at least in this moment. So let me attempt to do that. And so I don't know, that was a fun situation, really, more than anything.
I'll never forget the "How sorry, Burna." Like, I mean, it was just so perfect how you said it. It was so perfect.
It's just a question.
Just a question that has an answer. She just didn't want to give the answer. She's not sorry enough. That's for sure. Can I ask you a strategy question? You and Horacio were like out on an island. Nerys was kind of like in the middle because she still had the allegiance with Jay and that whole faction to some degree. I would have thought that when it got down to, like, you're starting to get down to like only not a few players, but enough players where if you can swing a vote, you can all of a sudden have like really the right numbers on your side. And to me, and I don't know, maybe you're shaking your head like you've heard this before. To me, Ed was the perfect person to try to get to and be like, come over to us. We're going to win all the challenges because it's us three. So one of us is going to win. We can protect each other. You're higher on the totem pole with us than you are with Jay and his crew. And by the way, we're all going to be good in the final, but we know when it comes to finals, like anything can happen. So we're all kind of willing to be in the final together. So not worried about that part. It seemed to me like Ed was maybe a linchpin that maybe you guys could have gone in and tried to steal.
Yeah, no, everything you're saying makes sense. I think that was that was a disappointing situation for sure with Ed, just because we did save him in the previous vote with when Asaf ended up going home. I've mentioned before, he was talking. He's like, well, I'm just gonna vote myself, or I'm just it's already gonna be me. And I was like, no, Ed, it's not. Like, we've worked very hard on this other side to make sure that we have the votes to get the stalemate. So just don't volunteer. Like, just give it a minute. The vote happens. Unfortunately, he keeps it the stalemate when Corey tries to switch it up. And he said, he's like, I'm not going to forget it for sure. Like I appreciate it. I'm not going to forget it. And I was like, cool. Thinking that, like, okay, this is the second time your alliance has put you at the bottom with votes. So hopefully this is the time where you realize, like, all right, you know what? This is, let me, they don't care about me. And not only they don't care about me, but it's just like they've done this before earlier in the game. And yeah, so Ed has said, in interviews and stuff, how he like wishes that he worked with us. And yeah, it just is. It was just like, it made everything you're saying makes sense. And I think he knew that. And I don't know, for me, it's one of those things where like it's hard for like Zach Nichols has said, he's like, it is hard to go against the numbers. Like it's hard to look at the numbers and go against them for some people. And I feel like even Ed has said, like he typically he's not that type that falls into that line, but maybe his previous experience, I think he had like volunteered to go in or something like that and just had a little bit more. He wanted to play a safer game, and and I don't know, it's just not how I operate in like a lot of scenarios. So it seems like it's not how he operates too. He said like that's just not me normally, but he just fell into it in this one, and didn't really. I think that's the same thing with him and with Colleen. I always say like a safe move or a smart move or whatever is admirable. But like your guys' moves didn't change anything. Like not just because like Colleen was numbers wise was still going to be exactly where she's at in the final right now, regardless of who she worked with. So it's just like the moves that you guys made at these times, like especially as they were people that were voicing that they wanted to step up and do something different. I think that was my thing. It's like, well, like that's awesome if you make a move and like it changes the game entirely for you as an individual, but it didn't. So I don't know. It is definitely
well,
I agree with what you're saying.
Let me hold your feet to the fire on this though. So if you could go back and you could have gone in on Ed politically a little bit more and tried to draw him to your side, because it doesn't sound like you and Horacio like really made like a concerted effort to like continuously do that. Would you have gone back and done it, or would you just like let the chips fall where they may?
I think yes, in the sense I feel like for me, a big takeaway in general is social pressure. Like I'm just not me and Rossi are both people like we check in at the beginning, and then if anything changes, we'll let you know. But like if it doesn't change, then like whatever I told you earlier still stays.
Right.
These games, we're not paranoid people, and so these games have a lot of people, are an environment that breeds paranoia and breeds fear, and people do need more check-ins. And I think that we kind of like and do need more social pressure. We need conversations. Like you see the girl, for me it was like, Ed, remember what we did? He's like, yeah, I appreciate it. We're like, cool. And then that's it. Like I didn't know that I needed to sit down with him, with Horacio, and just be like, my guy, like, and make sure there's a camera there to witness this conversation. And that way at least like you have to hold accountable. And I had that with other people too, where like we would have a conversation, make some sort of deal. But like, they weren't as worried about their reputation because the camera wasn't there. And now I'm like, okay, noted. I need to make sure that A, there's a camera there for these conversations, and B, that I do need to push, because even with that vote with Olivia when she got called in, Michelle was right there saying like, hey, you got to pick Mariah. And I'm like, now in hindsight, I'm like, you know what? Maybe we should be like, absolutely not. You realize that you should not do that for a million reasons. You're going to regret it, as she did approximately 60 seconds later when she was like, oh, let me switch places with Nerys. So it's just like, now I do know, I'm like, okay, like every opportunity I need to speak up, because these people do need, a lot more pressure on them for certain decisions, and also just approach wise, like game wise, like, I think it was funny. Horacio and Nerys just did that. They were talking with Zach Nichols and Pierre on that podcast, and they were saying like, talking about the benefit of taking things more personally. Me and him don't really take things personally. But he's like, no, like if someone votes you in, they need to know, okay, now I will come after you. I will take that personally. And at least and I think that's something where I'm like, maybe we should have more of that, because we're just like, oh, it's the game. It's fine. And making it really easy, I think. So definitely, yeah, some takeaways. So yeah, sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but yes, I think that at least having more direct conversations. I don't know what it will have changed or not, but at least we wouldn't have this question.
I mean, my whole thing there is I think there's a way to be political without being like underhanded. And to me, it would have been so easy to go up to Ed and be like, where are you in this alliance? Where are you rated in this alliance? Where would you be rated in our alliance? And that, like, to me, that's just more like to him and clarifying a very obvious point that maybe he's not really considering.
And I forget that also, that's the other thing where like, Well, you forget that you need to spell things out for people, because for me, sometimes just like, this is apparent, and it's just like, but it's not always apparent to everybody. So making sure that you remind them, like, and that's a very smart guy. So I don't think that he was lacking awareness, but maybe he was lacking like the awareness, but like it wasn't
clarity.
top of mind. Clarity, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't top of mind. And so maybe just making sure they were like, hey, by the way, like, really say this out loud, like, or draw it out on paper. Like, we need to make sure you saw this. And so I think, yeah, that I don't know, that's those are things I feel like took away for sure.
So I got a few more questions, then I'll get you out of here. One of those questions is from the chat. You mentioned the cameras kind of being on, being off. Like, you know, obviously you see everything. We don't necessarily see everything because of the edits. And X-Brain Burst says, hey, Kyland, who from the, and I don't know if you have an answer to this question. It's a tough question. Who from the 39 do you think got an unfair edit or was portrayed differently than how they really acted or played the game?
I would probably only say James, because James is hilarious and has a very funny personality, and none of that came through. As far as gameplay wise, he was just he's acknowledged. He's like, you know what, Zara was right. I was Mariah's like chihuahua, like just her whatever, and it kept him, you know, very far in the game. So like, you know, props to him, because his strategy actually is the only reason he moved forward. That's the thing, it worked. So I think that is one thing I would say. Everyone else, I feel like, I don't know, I've noticed Jay is talking a lot like, yeah, I got a villain edit. It's like, I mean, you had one of your best friends put in a tough situation where she was crying, and you said that you wanted to do it because you guys thought it would be fun and juicy to do. So like, that's a pretty villainous thing to do. Yeah. I don't think this is the edit. I feel like if anything, it's a disservice to himself by like fighting that and just saying like, yeah, you know what, I was a villain this time, as opposed to saying instead like, oh, I wasn't, like, you know, I was loyal and all this, where it's like, we have so many examples that we're pointing to that's not the case. So like, it's like, if you're loyal to people with conflicting views, the same thing for Michelle, then like at some point it impedes your ability to actually follow through with loyal actions. So like, if you're loyal to these 3 people and not to these people, then then say I was loyal to these people rather than saying I was loyal, because I was loyal would not be correct. But I was loyal to these people is correct. So it's just, I think people just have trouble sometimes with like acknowledging what they do, and it would just serve them so much better to just like own up to their actions, because it is a game. Most of these games, you can lie, you can write, you can do slimy things. And you could just say like, yeah, you know what, I did. That was the move I made. And then nobody can fight with you. That's the end of the conversation. But when you're like, no, here's why, like, or this or whatever, or this view, or you don't see everything, it's just like, yeah, but that's I think where people are getting caught up. So the only edit that I see that was off was really just that one with James not being, he's showing off his personality.
That's really interesting, because you're right. We didn't get a chance to see his personality. And so we therefore just assumed he didn't have much of one, which is totally unfair, right? Yeah. I'm really glad you clarified that. I mean, that's great to hear. Okay. I've got one more challenge question, and then I have a closing question, which I close every CNN Sports episode with. First of all, I seem to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, you might've said it on the show, like, you're pretty knowledgeable about past challenges, right? You've like studied it to some degree. Yes or no?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So I was having an argument with a buddy of mine. It wasn't really an argument, more of a discussion we were talking about the male challenge competitors over the years. And we were talking about who our top 3 would be in their prime, if you will. I mean, most of these guys are all still in their prime to some degree, but just picturing them in their prime. And the order that I went in was top 3: CT, Bananas, and Jordan. Any dispute there? Maybe you haven't considered that question before. Who am I missing from that list? And again, I'm just talking about the male competitors for the sake of this question.
Oh, no, I think that list is spot on. I think that list is spot on. Well, okay. That's the only thing I will say is Prime is now, because of the nature of the game, Prime is complicated, because it's like CT has had various levels of, you know, it's like Johnny has had seasons where he was like in his best physical shape, that he didn't win or that like wouldn't be considered as good of a win as others, and CT the same. So I feel like, that's why I almost feel like you have to measure like well-rounded careers, because then you do end up with that. I think that exact list. I think that exact list is probably true if you were to pick like physical prime or you were to pick, overall. But yeah, it is. It's such a complicated game, and listening, and I feel very spot on with that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess with Prime, that's a good point that you just raised. I think with Prime, I'm thinking like their political game Prime as well. But I think
Yeah,
to your, it's probably the same list no matter how you break that down.
yeah, for sure. Exactly. That, like, as you say that, I was like, this is different. However, the result would be the same.
Right.
And I feel very aligned with that list. It was fun. Yeah, the Johnny and CT just did a chat together on Johnny's podcast, and it was, I don't know if you saw that, but it was just fun to hear them talk about like how you could measure it different ways. But for sure, I
Yeah.
mean, they just have that tracker. But it's always interesting though to wonder, like, Jordan's done what, like less than half of the seasons, and
Mhm.
has, it's 4 championships if you count the world championship, and 3 if you count without. But it's just like 3 to have so many less games is significant. So, but I feel like those 3 are the 3 to be in the conversation. I think there's some rose-colored glasses on some other old school players. I'm like, nah, this is the 3. Like, these are 3.
You're thinking of Wes, aren't you?
No, I'm not thinking of Wes, actually. No, I think of Landon.
He'd be mentioned for me. He'd be honorable for me.
I think of Landon, who I think is amazing. But people put Landon above like CT and Johnny, and I'm like, I think Landon's awesome, but I feel like you put him above CT and Johnny feels feels wrong to me. But I mean, in that conversation, as far as like, Grace in prime scenario, like to have in the conversation, I'm about. I think that's my only thing. I feel bad because I'm definitely not throwing shade at Landon. I think that he's amazing. It just was that comparison. I was like, all right, guys, hold on, let's see.
No, I mean, Landon's great, but like we're talking about a different stratosphere when we're talking about those other guys. By the way, I ran into CT very randomly, like I don't know, 6-8 months ago. He could not have been nicer. I'm telling you, like he was. Have you met CT?
You still haven't met him? Nope.
Oh my god,
I'm excited for that. That's awesome to hear.
This guy could not have been nicer. So, I mean, just so gracious with his time. We only talked for a couple of moments, but he took time to just, it was my wife and I that ran into him, took time. He was with his son to talk to us and take a picture with us, and couldn't have been nicer. Okay. A couple more. So, because we're trying to help people here, Kyland, I noticed in one of your things you were talking about journaling. Do you do that every day? And are there any other healthy habits that like you do that maybe you can impart on other people?
Okay, so one thing I actually got from a friend, there's this girl, she's called the Girl IQ on Snapchat and TikTok. She does like a lot of life hack stuff. She actually told me every day when she wakes up, the first thing that she says is today's going to be a great day. And I picked that up from her. I started doing that because I was like, what an awesome thing to do. Like, open my eyes and stuff. I'm like, today's a great day. Like, not going to be. Today's a great day. Like it is. And so I think that, just gratitude, positivity, like not toxic positivity. You can acknowledge, when things are difficult or sad or unfortunate. But I feel like, just, okay, but now how am I gonna make the best of this? I'm forgetting who said it, but probably one of my life plan quotes is, things tend to work out best for those who make the best of things that tend to work out. I think it's like John Wooden or Vince Lombardi or one of the athlete coaches. But I feel like that is my ethos for life. And as far as the journaling, I don't do it every day. That would be a lie. But I have continuously gotten better at it. I feel like I had over the, most of my adult life. I definitely wasn't doing it before then, but over most of my adult life, I would journal a couple of times a year. And over the last year or two, I found this prompt journal called Inside Then Out, really cool little company. And they have these prompts that have made it a lot easier for me. So for me, I realized that having the prompts makes a difference. And that's what I would say is find out what works for you. I know people that do audio journals that record themselves. Some people are doing blog journals, some people are writing, some people are typing on their computer. And I think that sometimes we get caught up in extremes. Like, okay, I have to do it this way, or I have to do it, I have to do it every day. And then you miss a day, which is what I would do. I would miss a day and I'm like, you know what? This month's over. Like, I'll see you next month or next quarter. And now I'm like, you know what? Hey, it's okay. I missed that day, but like, let's just do it the next day or whatever. And also, not setting up unrealistic expectations for yourself in terms of, and I think this can apply to everything besides journaling, but I feel like sometimes it's like, all right, let me journal for 15 minutes. And I'm like, ooh, I only have 3 minutes. It's like, well, then do it for 3 minutes. That's okay. And that's what I think I'm reminding myself for that and other habits that I want to build. So those things and hydration. Most sicknesses are linked to a lack of hydration. So in some way or another, they're either made worse or created. So, drink some water.
I love that. And by the way, it's good for like clearer skin and things of that nature too. I mean, water is that's really sage advice. It's so basic, but it's so good. All right, Kyland, my final question, and I ask everybody this. Because you just mentioned gratitude, and like I think that's a huge thing. I'm like building healthy habits, all of that. To me, it starts from gratitude, being thankful for what you have instead of being negative for what you don't have. With all that in mind, I like to ask people 3 people that they'd like to thank in the here and now for, in your case, getting you to where you are today, whether that's mentally or career-wise or what have you. Are there 3 people in your life that impacted you in such a way that they deserve your gratitude in this moment?
I mean, there's definitely more than 3 people, but if I was to narrow it down to 3 people, I probably would say like, man, I was trying to think if I want to group all my family, if I want to say like my mom and my dad, very, very different styles. But they really did. They really did bring so many different values, ingrain them into me with support, with love. And that is, especially as I get older, I feel more and more appreciative and more like, whoa, like they did it without all the podcasts and YouTube videos and all the journals and stuff of how to be parents. And both of them had much rougher childhoods than I did. And I feel like that is, as I've learned more and more about that, I'm just like more and more grateful for it. And I'm like amazed by how well they did and thankful for how well they did and their continued support. Especially, like I said, there's multiple kids. I have 4 sisters and all of us are very productive, positive members of society and people and doing things that we're happy about. And, so I think I would say them and then probably Tom Shadyac, who I mentioned earlier, was just has been such a positive mentor and influence in my life. So, I would give it those 3. And I was like, I don't know where you can learn. I did a podcast with my mom. My dad's not one for the public eye at all, so he probably never would. But Tom Shadyac is everywhere. He has like, obviously his films back in the day, but he has a book called Life's Operating Manual that I recommend to a lot of people, and a documentary called I Am. And so, those are some positive influences I would share with others.
Speaking of, so I do Twitter spaces every other Thursday. I do a Twitter space where people can just jump in, ask me questions. We try to problem solve together, again, create healthy habits, things of that nature.
Love that.
My mom jumped in the Twitter space. I didn't know she was going to jump in. She's barely even on Twitter. She jumped in. There was actually a comment here from Joe Neuenfeld.
I saw it. She took over.
Yeah. She actually had some really good, I shouldn't say actually just belittle the moment, but
I get you.
Yeah. I just didn't expect her to come and just get on and, start talking about, some of the stuff that others were talking. Maybe one day, Kyland, you can join me on one of those chats.
No,
can I ask you?
Hope, drop the link whenever you do them. And if I'm on, I'll hop over.
Yeah. Twitter space is so easy, right? You just jump in for 5. We had Rick Gaiman. He does a website called rickrungood.com. He jumped in for 5 minutes. He talked with us for 5 minutes and then he was out. It was really cool, actually. So you have 4 sisters and it's you. Was it your parents who gave you the perspective that you have now? I'm just trying to figure out, what's the formula? How is it that you and your 4 sisters are the productive people that you are? What was it that your parents, what was the point of emphasis? Can you nail it down in any possible way?
I think it is, as corny as it may sound, it really just love. They loved us and they showed that love through support and support included pushing us. They were never Oh, okay. Like, no, we were so well loved without ever being coddled. And I think that
Mhm.
that made a big difference. And, everyone requires different levels of support. And like, I don't use coddled lightly. Like I'm not going to call a lot of things like, positive warmth, coddling. But I think that for us, I feel like that would be the easiest way to simplify it was like, they loved us enough to push us. They loved us enough to tell us like my mom, knew that I had trouble. Like I was pretty nonverbal until I was like 5. So when I was like in maybe elementary school, if not middle school, like my mom um, would bring me with her to different like chamber of commerce meetings and just make me talk to people and
Hmm.
it pushed a lot of discomfort out of me and gave me ways to mask that like overall I'm very thankful for and as far as interaction with others and skill set with communication and then I think and my dad was just very smart and told us we could be smart and I think that yeah, I mean, would play chess with me and my sister and would give us challenges like different like physical challenges and stuff to like push us and yeah and so I feel like that in nurturing in it was like, I played T-ball for like a year or like maybe 2. And I was like, I don't like this. And I was like, all right, well, you gotta the household rules, like everyone has to play sports and volunteer. And so she's like, okay, well then find something else. And then so I was like playing soccer for a little bit and I didn't like that. And then I think I did like flag football or something and track or eventually football. And then in high school, I was working 3 jobs. So she didn't make me do sports anymore. But that was I don't know that I think that those sort of pushes they always came from a loving place, and I think that is I remember a really cool interview with Kobe Bryant. He talks about how like his dad was like pushing him, but made sure that he knew like, hey, if you get first or you get last, like
I love you
I
anyway.
still love you. Yeah, I love you anyway.
Yeah,
And so it's just
I've
like
seen that.
that's empowering to know like, oh,
Mhm.
because now I can fail and still be loved. So like let me try hard
I
and
love
shoot
that
high.
quote from Kobe.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's such a great way to end this conversation. And by the way, first of all, 2 things. One is you slipped in that your dad like put you through physical challenges, which is like really appropriate given that 25 years later you're actually on the challenge, like dominating a lot of these actual dailies and eliminations. The other thing you mentioned was the volunteer part. You kind of just like very understatedly slipped that in. And this isn't to you. This is for anybody out there that has kids or is raising kids. Um, get them to volunteer and they'll get all the perspective that Kyland Young has right now. I mean, I really think that's probably where you got a lot of it outside of your parents themselves. When you volunteer and you get to see maybe some of the underprivileged or people that don't have what you have, you get to see that and you get to understand that like life's not all about you. It's not all about your perspective. It's about everybody's perspective, and not everybody is the same. Not every circumstance is the same. So, Kyland, thank you so much for coming on. I gobbled up like way more of your time than I thought I would. You're so gracious with your time, and I really appreciate it. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think on that volunteer spot, I remember I heard a long time ago. I can't remember where, but they said, when you feel in need, give, and you'll be reminded of how much you have. And so I think that that's something that I've taken into that found to be true repeatedly. And so it's a very easy way, like figure out some, if you can't give money, give time or whatever. And usually I think that a lot more people can give some sort of money, but even if it's not money, it's like, some sort of time or effort or kind
Mhm.
words or phone call or whatever, phone call, or whatever. It doesn't have to be strangers. You can give to people that you know. So I think that either way is going to be beneficial for you as an individual. And yeah, I mean, final words, I appreciate you for reaching out. And I always encourage people to reach out. I love connecting. And I think that, yeah, I mean, and I know that there's some questions in the chat that I didn't get to. Like I said, I mentioned, I'm on TikTok almost every day. So I do TikTok live and I try my best to answer every single question. So if you ever want to come by, anyone in the chat or watching this later on, feel free. Love to have you and get to the questions that we missed and or any questions follow up from this. And then yeah, and then just I'm really I think that even reading the questions, like I said, you're audience, your community you've built seem very, eager to learn, just like me and just like you, and to grow and be better and be positive. And so I just want to commend you for that, because that didn't happen by accident. It happened with you taking risks, like, leaving the legal world and corporate world to do crazy things like the poker tournament, and then just pursuing those relationships. Because that's the other thing, is people meet people all the time and then they don't do anything with it. And you reach out and you meet people, and clearly you're doing a lot with it. And I just commend you for that, because that's really awesome. That it's easier not to do it, and you're doing it. So props to you.
Appreciate that. I mean, certainly stepping outside of your comfort zone, that's the only way to grow. And Kyland, you know that as well as anybody. Thank you for joining the show. Really appreciate you. Hopefully we can work together in the future. And everybody in the chat, thanks for being here. And definitely follow Kyland Young on TikTok. It's at Kyland.Young. And then, of course, on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Kyland Young. Super easy there. Kyland, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on CNN Sports.
Perfect. See you next time.